Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Welcome to the City of KC Council meeting on the 16th of March 2020. I'd like to welcome those watching live stream and those of you in the gallery. Welcome and good afternoon. And I also want to acknowledge, and I will introduce later, but just to acknowledge that we have Mr. Boardman is also in the meeting, but not physically here present this afternoon. I'll introduce both of the administrators later. I'd like to start with the statement of acknowledgement. The City of KC proudly acknowledges the traditional owners, KC's Aboriginal communities and their rich culture, and pays respect to their elders past, present and future. We acknowledge Aboriginal people as Australia's first peoples and as the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we work and live. Our diversity statement. The City of KC is home to remarkable diversity with many cultures, languages, faiths and communities of worship, ages, LGBTQI+ identities and landscapes, together forming our rich and dynamic community story. From our first Australians to our most recent arrivals and every wave between, the City of KC welcomes and represents all community members and their respective ambitions to live healthy, rewarding and happy lives. We recognise this diversity as our strength and we aim to share, nurture and celebrate it. So welcome everyone. I'd like to start with inviting my colleagues to introduce themselves. Firstly, Mr. Belmar.
Good afternoon, Chair.
And Mr. Boardman.
Good afternoon, Chair, colleagues and everyone in the gallery. I do apologise for not being there to answer beyond my control. We will work through the technology as last minute as it is. I will mute until called upon to discuss certain issues. But again, I offer my apologies and thanks to Jordan and his team for making allowances.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. And I'd like to welcome and acknowledge our officers here present this afternoon, starting on my left with Jen Bedmar, who's the Director Customer and Business Transformation, Steve Coldham, who's Director Community Life, James Collins, Director City Planning and Infrastructure, Sheena Frost, Director Corporate Services, and of course on my right, our Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Glenn Patterson. And we're supported this afternoon by a number of officers, most notably Jacinta, who's here helping us with the minutes, and Jordan, who is our technical advisor. And I acknowledge the other council officers that are present. I now move to the confirmation of minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of February 2021. Can I have a mover and seconder to confirm the minutes?
Yes, I'll move those.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. Seconded.
I'm pleased to second, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. There's just a little bit of echo, so we apologise for that. It sounds very loud in here, doesn't it? Thank you. Now move to declaration of interests. I've considered my obligations under Section 130 of the Local Government Act 2020 and have no interests to declare relevant to the agenda this afternoon. I also note no officers have declared any conflicts with respect to reports on the agenda this afternoon. Can I request my fellow administrators to acknowledge if they have any conflict of interests to declare?
Chair, I have no conflicts of interest to declare.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. Mr. Boardman?
Chair, likewise, I have nothing to declare.
Thank you. Now move on to item 4 on the agenda, public question time. And we have 3 public questions for this afternoon's council meeting. I will read and acknowledge the questions irrespective of whether those people are here present in the gallery. But the first question is from Mr. Gary Page, and if he's in the gallery, can he please just raise his hand? I don't believe he is. Thank you. The question is, how many ordinary council meeting recordings are locked as private, and when will they become available for public access? I can respond to that this afternoon by indicating that we did become aware that there are a number of those live stream videos of previous council meetings that had been archived and set to private. They have now been restored. So, Mr. Page, if you are listening live stream, we do invite you to have a look at those and contact us again if you're not able to access them on the internet. There is no charge for the access to those online. Thank you for the question. Question 2 is from Mr. Brendan Brown, and I don't believe Mr. Brown is in the gallery either. The question from Mr. Brown is, in 2018, Casey claimed to lose submissions, the ramifications being now a number of houses in Hampton Park can have buildings up to 5 stories built directly over their back fence with no right to object. Is the City of Casey willing to properly review what really occurred regarding those submissions? I am advised, Mr. Brown, that this is a matter that has been discussed with you on a number of occasions, and I'll just recount the response that I understand has previously been made to you. The Hampton Park Central Development Plan was adopted by Council on the 4th of June 2019. After the development plan was adopted, Council was notified that one submission had not been considered. When the error was identified, Council officers reviewed the issues and concerns raised in your submission and provided a response to you outlining the findings of that review. The review highlighted the status of the centre as a major activity centre and the support for residential growth around the centre as per the adopted Casey housing strategy. Therefore, it was determined that no changes were required to the development plan as a result of your submission, and it was considered unnecessary to re-adopt the development plan. I note your concern that 5-storey development could occur within the centre. However, I understand that the previously adopted plan did not have any maximum building heights, and ultimately any application must undergo a thorough planning assessment, including consideration of impacts to adjoining properties. The third question is also from Mr. Brendan Brown, and that question is, can the City of Casey reveal how much it spends each year effectively subsidising the development of land for urban purposes through infrastructure contribution plans? And in response, officers have advised that developer contribution plans supporting delivery of infrastructure in growth areas are structured to collect towards the cost of infrastructure, but are not expected to provide full cost recovery. Infrastructure contributions help fund basic and essential infrastructure for new and growing communities. In respect to levies collected toward community and recreation facilities, the levies are specifically capped by the state government well below the actual cost of delivery. As detailed in the City of Casey 2019-20 annual report, developer contribution plan projects with a total value of $110,397,003 were delivered in 2019-20. The funding sources for these projects was $84,321,152 of developer contributions, monetary levies received from developers, $13,754,849 of council rates, $7,708,059 in government grants, and $4,612,943 in works in kind, infrastructure provided by developers in lieu of levies. So that's the conclusion of questions this afternoon. And thank you for the submission of those questions to public question time. I now move on to officer reports, and that's at item 5 in the agenda. And there are 11 officer reports this afternoon in open council and no confidential reports. So I move to item 5.1, Quarterly Community Report, October to December 2020. And can I ask for a mover for that report?
Yes, I'll move that.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. And a seconder?
I will second that, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. Mr. Belmar, I invite you to speak to the report.
Thank you, Chair. I move this this matter, which is the quarterly report prepared by Council with respect to the period October to December 2020, which, as I'm sure we all remember, was a period during which COVID was impacting the entire community. What I take away from this report is that Council continued to undertake its work and to deliver services, and to also program its future works. The matters I'd like to highlight very briefly are, for example, the report refers to the citizenship program, which is now underway, engaging and finding new community leaders. That's an important project that began during that period and now continues. I note also that the report refers to that infrastructure work continued with respect to the delivery of 4 new reserves. I also note that Council's arts program continued, and although it was delivered often in a digital manner, that project continued. And finally, I also want to note that the Shape Your City consultation was undertaken during that period, and that it resulted in over 6,000 communications with members of the community. And again, that was in a digital forum. So each of those matters tell me that Council continued to do its work during that period, although it was restricted by COVID. I also note that the report contains financial information, and I won't go into that at this period because there is a fuller report that's about to be addressed. And I am confident and satisfied that Council continued to do its work during that period, and I commend this report to the community as one which contains a good summary of the work that Council did during that quarter.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Chair, if I could reserve my rights to speak on this issue and combine my comments with the next issue that Mr Belmar has alluded to regarding the mid-year budget review.
Certainly, Mr Boardman, thank you. Look, just a few comments I would like to make, and that is that whilst some people may not consider this extraordinary bedtime reading, I do invite people to have a look at the quarterly community report. It does detail in a very neat and easy to read format what the work of the Council has been over the past quarter. I think it's exemplary in terms of its accessibility, and I'm really very impressed with the continued activity that officers in particular have undertaken in resourcing and supporting the community through both service provision but also in terms of consultation in quite difficult circumstances, constrained circumstances. So I think it's a very worthwhile document. For those of you who are listening, I know are interested in the City of Casey, so please do access the agenda and have a look at it. It's very informative and you'll find it answers many of your questions. So with that, I'll put that motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Now move to item 5.2, the 2020 mid-year budget review. Can I have a mover for that report?
Chair, I will move that report.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Seconder?
I second that.
Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman, I invite you to speak to the item.
Thank you, Chair. Could I reaffirm yours and Mr Belmar's comments regarding the community engagement report and also the extensive financial material that is contained within that report, which is expanded upon with the publicly available 2021 mid-year budget review. The work that's gone into ensuring that the organisation meets its strategic objectives against the corporate plan and ensuring that we do it in a fiscally responsible manner is immense, and all of the staff involved in putting not just the reports together but also delivering the projects against the corporate plan as stipulated in the reports need to be acknowledged. The budget review expands upon the community engagement report by allocating $90,000 to the public open space reserve for the purpose of delivering the Doveton Pool and the Park Master Plan. We have that as a separate agenda item at this meeting, which we will be spending a significant amount of time discussing. There has been quite a significant amount of public consultation and feedback to date, and so whilst we are approving additional resources to conduct that ongoing community consultation, we will be discussing that at the right time. We also need to be talking about additional capital works budget and also changing some fees to the Arthur Wren Hall. In doing so, we also have at agenda item 5.7 rating matters, including the treatment hardship assistance, which is something that also has a significant impact upon the financial performance of the organisation. But if I could point out, Chair, just one moment, please, Chair. I do apologise for that. If I could just point out that whilst we have approved financial hardship assistance up until the end of this month, that matter, as has been foreshadowed in the papers this afternoon, is subject to further review, and that does have a significant impact upon the operating budget and the overall financial performance of the organisation. And we can see from financial performance there has been some revisions downwards against the budget insofar as rate revenue. If I could assure the community, Chair, that we are treating these decisions with the utmost diligence and consideration, and we are ensuring that there are two main factors effectively of the issue which informs our decision. The first one is that we continue to meet our statutory and other responsibilities under the Local Government Act to run a fiscally responsible organisation. But the second thing is that we do and are very conscious of some of the hardship and challenging environmental factors, and we do continue to provide levels of assistance. So whilst we acknowledge there is an impact from a financial and revenue perspective, the lens that we need to ensure that our community is represented and assistance provided. The disclosure information is there to be read. With those high-level remarks, there's not much more I can add at this stage here, except to say that as the community engagement strategy, we are well on track with delivering against our core plan. We are well on track to delivering sound efficiency and economic development.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. Mr. Belmar, any further comments?
Very brief comments, Chair. I've also carefully considered the mid-year budget review. I note that we are certainly in difficult budgetary times, but nonetheless I am satisfied that through careful budgeting and financial management, our council continues to be in a position where it will be able to meet its obligations. I also note the work of the financial team headed by Bernard Rowan, who is always very astute in the briefings that he provides us and able to provide any information that we require with respect to Council's position. And with those remarks, I commend the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. I'd just also like to add some comments to the discussion, particularly around the capital works budget and the continued pressures on Council in terms of the provision of infrastructure to this community. It is a challenge. We do have some very, very significant budget pressures, and we are already in the process of talking about next year's budget, and I think we've got a lot of work yet to do. I'll put that motion to the vote. Item 5.2. Carried. Item 5.3, Growing Suburbs Fund allocations. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Yes, I will move that recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. Seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Mr. Belmar. Mr. Boardman, would you speak to the motion?
Thank you, Chair, and I acknowledge your remarks regarding pressures on our ongoing capital works obligations, and it is sufficient for projects totaling just over $7 million to the government's Growing Suburb Fund, which hopefully will alleviate some of those pressures. Through extensive analysis by the council officers and consideration against what is balance between new asset development, asset renewal, and appropriate infrastructure, there are 5 projects that have been identified.
Mr. Boardman, I'm just going to interrupt you there. We're just getting quite a lot of buffering in your voice, so perhaps could I just ask you just to speak a little bit more slowly, and we'll just try and follow it. Please continue.
Thank you, Chair. I will try my very best and make comments to the quality of the NBN in my area. What I will say is that the 5 projects identified through that balance of being assets that need to be renewed and replaced and new assets to meet community expectations. The 5 projects being the Pearsdale Recreation Reserve Pavilion redevelopment, the Woodbine Children's Centres renewal, the Roy Bastion Reserve Regional Playground renewal and upgrade, the Lincroft Family Community Centre upgrade and the Tooradin Recreational Reserve new pavilion redevelopment have been costed. The appropriate level of council contributions are included in the report, totalling just short of $5 million. And community consultation has suggested that these are high priority projects for the municipality and ones which we are all very pleased to support. If we are successful under these applications, the projects will certainly be reflected in any further budget update and delivery against our community plan. But we do thank the state government for allowing us to put these applications in for council in the time to develop comprehensive applications against the guidelines of the grants program. We do wish the applications every success and hope that they do come through so that the community can be fast-tracked on these very necessary additional facilities.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar?
Thank you, Chair. Likewise, I join Mr Boardman in commending this motion. I note that the papers refer to the extensive community engagement that's occurred in selecting these programs. I note also that community engagement hasn't been an ad hoc process that's occurred for these applications, but is part of long-term planning by council through its master plan preparation and also through long-term condition reports. And on that basis, I'm also satisfied that these projects that have been selected are, on the advice we've received from officers, the most appropriate and the ones that will provide the community the greatest benefit from being selected if they are fortunate enough to be selected. And with those comments, I commend the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. I'll put that motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Now move to item 5.4, Doveton Pool in the Park Master Plan. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Yes, I move that.
You're moving the recommendation in the papers, Mr Belmar? Or?
No, Chair. I'm moving an alternate recommendation, which may be placed on screen, or I have a copy of it, which I will read.
We'll just pause until we get it onto the screen. Just give our officers a moment. Thank you. It's on the screen now. You might just read it for the benefit of the gallery.
Yes,
Mr.
I will
Belmar.
do so.
Thank you.
I am moving the following motion. 1. The Council notes the Doveton Community Infrastructure Needs Assessment, Aquatic Facility Demand Analysis and Open Space Assessment attached to this report. 2. Council notes the findings of these reports that indicates that an aquatic facility is not a priority at this site, but that there is a need for increased district open space within the Doveton-Umemmering area. 3. The community and stakeholder engagement commenced to test the scope of facilities outlined in 2 above as the basis for the development of a master plan for public open space at the site. And 4, the report be presented to Council following the community engagement process. And Chair, that's the motion that I'm moving.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair, I am pleased to second the motion as read.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar, please speak to the motion.
Thank you, Chair. This is an important issue that Council is dealing with because, like all issues that Council considers, we are continuously faced with situations of having to consider an appropriate way and an appropriate manner in which council funds long-term projects. In this particular case, we have been presented by officers with a number of reports and evidence that suggests that further consultation needs to occur with respect to public open space within the Doveton and Newmemmering area. And I am, as I move this motion, I am clear in moving it that no final decision has been made, and that what is occurring is community engagement with respect to what the future will be for Doveton Pool in the Park and what public open space should look like in the Doveton and Newmemmering area. And when I consider the reports that are attached to the papers, which have been prepared by experts in their fields, being town planning and other specialties, each of those reports carefully addresses the issues of the Doveton and Newmemmering community and the very particular issues that they face because of the challenges that are faced by some members of the community. And in carefully analysing the future use of that space, what these papers tell me is that it is time to consider the future of Doveton Pool in the Park and how it will best be continued to be used into the future. This is a facility that is obviously one that is has fond memories for many of the community. I have read the petitions that are available online. I've considered the material, and I am more than satisfied in moving this motion that going forward a proper engagement will occur with the community to hear what they have to say about the future of this facility. But nevertheless, I am also satisfied that as the matter currently stands, it is time to consider the future of this facility. I visited the facility. The facility is one which faces challenges with respect to the state of its current infrastructure, and it is time to consider its future. I'm absolutely comfortable in that. I have known and used that facility in the past. I did my Year 7 swimming lessons there. I won't tell you what year, but I can tell you I'm certainly familiar with the facility. And I know it's been there for a long time, and it's time to consider its future, and I am comfortable that we move forward in that fashion. But we are here to listen to the community and to make a careful decision that balances the needs of the community, our financial obligations long term, and the advice that we get from experts in the field of recreation and public open space use. And with those comments, I commend the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. Mr. Boardman, I invite you to speak to your seconding motion.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I am delighted to second the resolution as proposed through an amendment by Mr. Belmar. And I do apologise to the gallery that I'm not there in person to make these remarks, but I do want to assure all members of the community that have already been in contact with Council that we are listening to your feedback very, very carefully. I'd like to just seek the indulgence of the meeting, if I could, Chair, just with a personal comment. From about the age of 6 till my early to mid-30s, I was actually a competitive swimmer at district, at state, and sometimes when I trained hard enough at national level. And I don't think there is a pool in the state that I haven't swum in. I used to train at the Old North Lodge on Stud Road in Dandenong, and I think, if my memory serves me right, there was occasionally some cold summer mornings in the late 70s, early 80s. I do give my age away, Mr. Belmar, unfortunately, that we did go down to the Doveton Pool. And as an example of an old Olympic-size outdoor facility that was part of the boom post the 1956 Olympics, it is one that undoubtedly has served the community well. There are memories from individuals, there are memories from school carnivals, there are memories from other district and local comps that have utilised the pool, and many people have learnt to swim, as Mr. Belmar has, and have grown up in that facility. And we as administrators have not just extensively considered this through the lens of the Aquatic Facility Strategy 2019 to 41, but also what the community's real expectations of us are, and their expectations of the pool and any ongoing facilities. And there are three options that are being proposed in the myriad of reports, totalling several hundreds of pages, which hopefully gives the community an indication of the seriousness that we are considering this particular matter. But there is the continuation of outdoor aquatics. Obviously, there would be some capital upgrades if that was an option that council approved. There is consideration of indoor and outdoor aquatics, which would be a significant and quite costly, if I put it that way, potentially up to $40 million if we were to look at a combination of indoor and outdoor facilities. And there is a third option of no aquatics through facilities such as water play, which would be an expansion on the facilities that are there at the moment. As Mr. Belmar has articulated, and this is a critically important point, as administrators and as the council as a whole, we have not made any decision or landed on any preference or seek to direct the community in any way with this particular issue. And I remember very fondly and quite strongly that in the late 90s, when I was a Member of Parliament, and the very same issue came up with the continuation or otherwise of the Pine Forest swimming pool in Frankston North, where I was the local member, that the similarities are quite profound. An ageing facility, only seasonal, not heated at that stage, but with very strong community focus, participation and endorsement. And it has to be noticed that irrespective that one of the options at that point in time from the Frankston Council was the removal and redevelopment of that site, that the Pines Forest swimming pool still remains today, albeit with heating and some upgrades and some further community facilities. So there is a direct comparison not too far from the boundaries, in fact, abutting the boundaries of this municipality, which we do lend on and we do look to inform our decision making. As I articulated with some earlier remarks, Chair, that we have approved a budget to do a much more comprehensive community consultation, and ourselves as administrators will be a key part of that. And we want that dialogue and that communication with the community to continue. And we would want all of the options, all of the feedback, all of the aspects of what those real expectations in a longer term basis of this facility should be to be fed through to us, and for that participation to be long-standing. We do want to hear from everybody, and we do want to ensure that when we do make a decision that will be in the longest term best interest as possible to the community as a whole, that we will have all of the information at hand to do so. So I say those comments as a swimmer, as someone who's been through this particular issue previously in different guises, and that wants to ensure the community, as I'm sure my co-administrators and everyone at council does, that we want to have constructive dialogue so that we do make the best decision. And I do encourage anyone who has an interest in this matter to read the reports, as lengthy and as significant as they are, but particularly the Heritage Report, which really is a walking history of swimming pool development in this state and even in the country, that puts in perspective just why this particular swimming pool has such fond memories for so many members of the community. So with those comments, Chair, I do support the proposed amendment that Mr. Belmar has put, and do look forward to ongoing and long-standing community engagement on this particular issue so that we do make a decision that is in everyone's best long-term interests.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. I'm just going to make a few comments, and I'm feeling quite left out because I don't have any history with the Doveton pool, and I recognise that both of you, as my colleagues, do. But let me say this: I think these are decisions that are difficult decisions for councils. These are facilities that transcend municipal boundaries, and we need to look at this in the context of the whole. We need to look at the whole of the City of Casey and the infrastructure demands, because ultimately it's the ratepayers of the city that are going to be supporting and paying for these facilities. And whilst this is an older part of the city, we do have newer parts of the city as well that we must also consider. We have visited the site, and my observations are it is a building that's in decay and a pool that's in decay. It's also an incredibly constrained site physically. So for us to consider a future investment in that site, we really need to be quite convinced about the potential use that's going to be leveraged off that investment. So I reinforce the comments of both Mr Belmar and Mr Boardman that this is in no way a decision. It's really, as the report has set out in the words in the report, it's really testing this opportunity and this option, and then we need to consider that once that work and that community engagement occurs. So I put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Item 5.5, disposal of land at 1070 Cranbourne, Frankston Road, Cranbourne. Do I have a mover?
Yes, I'll move that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman, are you seconding that?
Yes, I will second that.
Thank you. Mr Belmar, please speak to the motion.
Thank you, Chair. This is in some respects a procedural motion with respect to the power of council to sell land, but it's also an important opportunity to reflect on the continuing work that council does to ensure that organisations such as Vic SES have at their disposal land within the municipal boundary to continue to offer their important services. This is an opportunity that has arisen for the disposal of a parcel of council land of some 5,000 square metres, and that the process be undertaken to transfer, to sell that land to the authorities to conduct for Vic SES. It's a great opportunity for that facility to be contained within the council. I commend the officers for their work in ensuring that they're continued.
Excuse me, Mr Belmar, could I just ask the gallery, we can hear you, so if I could just ask you to respect the meeting. Thank you. Please continue, Mr Belmar.
I commend the officers for their continued work in ensuring that they maintain good communication with these sorts of organisations, so that when an opportunity like this arises, it can be taken up. And with those comments, I commend the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman? Did you have anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. Only briefly to add that we thank the Victorian SES in the way that they've engaged with us on this particular acquisition, and that they very welcomely so have not sought capital from us to build this new facility, and we wish them well with their endeavours and look forward to a new facility that will be to the benefit of all members of the municipality. So thank them very much, and I'm pleased to second the resolution.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. I'll put that item to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.6, the Casey Fields lease. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Yes, I move that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Seconder?
Yes, I second that.
Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar, please invite you to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Chair. This motion is in some respects, the concluding motion of a long-term project that's been undertaken by Council to ensure that the Melbourne City Football Club, which is known as Melbourne City, takes up the opportunity to have its headquarters in the City of Casey. It's a fantastic opportunity for the City of Casey to have a professional football club, a soccer club, within its boundaries. It provides this motion provides for a 30-year lease. It provides for further infrastructure works to be done on the site, including an elite pitch, administration facilities, and in the long term, a master plan which will include a mini stadium. I commend the motion and all those involved in ensuring that this project went ahead. It is, in many respects, an incredibly exciting project to have this sort of organisation headquartered in Casey, and an amazing opportunity for young athletes, whether they love soccer yet or not, to have Melbourne City in their municipal boundaries. And with those comments, I commend the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman, would you like to speak?
It's very briefly, Chair. It is an exciting opportunity, not just for the municipality, for the southeast. When we were looking at this project as a whole, we were quite amazed that there was a growing and quite significant Melbourne City and A-League and W-League supporter base in the southeast that was unrealised and potentially untapped. And we're not just going to see increased participation rates at every single level, but we're certainly going to be seeing, as the development of Casey Fields moves on in the future, increased attendances and wonderful competition from both the A-League, the W-League and the junior leagues. So it has been something that's been many months in the process. We have previously announced it. It is fully supported and endorsed by many sectors of the community, and we do give a big heartfelt welcome to Melbourne City and all their affiliates to Casey Field and wish them every success in the future.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. I'll put that motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.7, update on rating matters including treatment of hardship assistance in 2020-21. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
I will move that, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Seconder?
I'll second that.
Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman, I invite you to speak to the motion.
I don't propose to add too much to this motion, Chair, considering we have discussed the financial situation and the challenges that the organisation is facing at the moment, except that we have extensively considered this particular issue, and we agreed to put a freeze on outstanding rates extended from the end of this month to the 30th of June, so the end of the financial year. And we also are not going to pursue legal action to recover outstanding rates in that period. The explanatory information is quite substantial. We have discussed this issue in previous council meetings, and I think it is appropriate and commensurate. Just one moment, sorry. I do apologise again for that interruption. It is appropriate and commensurate in the circumstances, and will go a long way to assisting the community with a number of difficulties that some members of the community are faced with. I do wholeheartedly endorse this council report.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar?
Chair, this motion is part of a number of motions that council has been moving, that us as administrators have been moving during the COVID period, to ensure that council does its best to work together with the ratepayers to ensure that hardship that's being met with respect to paying rates is addressed by council in the most sensitive way that it can. One way that it has done that is by ensuring that it does not pursue unpaid rates in the way that it could under its statutory powers. I am satisfied, having considered the material, that it is appropriate that we continue to provide this hardship measure, and hopefully we will be back to a more normal financial position in the future. But in the meantime, it is appropriate that council continue to be able to assist members of the community in this way.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. I too support the motion. I think this is most appropriate given the extensive information we've had about the current financial stress that many members of our community are under, the number of recipients of federal support during this period as well. And we, as you've indicated, both Mr Boardman and Mr Belmar, we do trust that the financial situation of our residents will improve in terms of their employment, etc., and that we can resume some level of normality going forward. But in the interim, our endeavour is to ensure that this community are afforded the opportunity for the consideration of that hardship that they're experiencing, and this recommendation, this motion this afternoon achieves that for a pause period of time. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Move to item 5.8, which is the Council CEO Instrument of Delegation update. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Yes, Chair, I will move that.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. And a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you. Mr Boardman, would you like to speak to item 5.8?
Thank you, Chair. This and item 5.9, the S6 Instrument of Delegation, are very important documents.
Sorry, Mr Boardman,
lengthy.
we're just on 5.8, not 5.9 as yet.
Yes, Chair, I'm where I am.
Okay.
They are related items. I'm prefacing my remarks by making that point. But as significant and lengthy as both of these instrument of delegations are, they are very important to ensure that there is a responsible exercise of powers conferred by Section 11.1 of the Local Government Act, and that equally there is a responsible level of reporting and acknowledgement and governance from ourselves as administrators and the council as a whole, and including our external bodies such as the Audit and Risk Committee, to ensure that those powers are utilised responsibly in accordance with not just the delegation but also statutory responsibilities. What we are doing with this particular resolution, Chair, is that we are increasing the CEO's delegation from its current level of 5 million to 15 million to ensure that we can provide the right level of assistance to the CEO or his delegate to improve the efficacy and efficiency of council in making decisions such as contracts, adherence, any other developments or other information that the CEO is empowered to do so. Whilst there has been some significant commentary publicly from the Victorian Auditor General and also IBAC around instruments of delegations and their levels, we have, as administrators, reasonably considered our expectations of the CEO and his executive team and the staff as a whole, and we believe that this is completely commensurate with best practice and commensurate with our expectations and the CEO's responsibility to us. It must be noted that as an increased performance reporting requirement to ensure that the CEO has this new instrument of delegation will be that a quarterly report will be provided to us on all contracts which the CEO approves between the $5 and $15 million mark. So this is not something that we are providing to the CEO on a set and forget basis. We will be monitoring ongoingly what use of this power is and its responsible attributes. And it will be something that we will, not just through our statutory obligations, but review on an ongoing basis. So whilst this does improve, as I said, the efficacy of the organisation as a whole, it does come with an increased level of performance reporting and financial reporting to us, and ones that we do take very seriously and consider wholeheartedly, and equally will be reporting publicly on those matters. So with those comments, Chair, I am going to move the resolution, and obviously I will support the resolution, Chair, and if I could just excuse myself from the meeting temporarily.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. We'll note that you're leaving the meeting temporarily. Thank you. Mr Belmar, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes. I can join with the comments of Mr Boardman that it is appropriate that this delegation occur. I note from the papers that this is the 8th version of this delegation, and to me that suggests that over time it is appropriate that the CEO have an increase in the dollar value of contracts that they can assign. It's appropriate in the exercise of our function as administrators to consider opportunities for more smooth running of the organisation, and this is one of them. It's a delegation that is appropriate in all the circumstances, and I note the increased reporting of opportunities or occasions on which the delegation is used, and for those reasons I support the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. I too support this recommendation, and we have carefully considered particularly the increased financial delegation to our CEO. That notwithstanding that, clearly the council adopt the council budget and set the parameters of that expenditure. So the increased reporting, performance reporting that Mr Boardman has referenced is equally important, and we have confidence that those objectives will be met. I move to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.9, Section 6, Instrument of Delegation Update, and this is referencing in particular planning matters. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
I think in the absence of Mr Boardman, I'll be moving this matter.
And I'll second the motion. Mr Belmar, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is another procedural motion in some respects which deals with the issue of delegation. In particular, this delegation is referable to decisions concerning planning permits, development plan decisions, and matters to do with public notice. It is an appropriate delegation to officers that they are able to determine matters under the Planning and Environment Act, as an example, under this delegation. Again, this is a matter that's arisen because, as we have been in our role as administrators, we have noted an opportunity for the delegation to be expanded, and that is what is occurring in this particular delegation. Nevertheless, any exercise of the delegation must be in accordance with the authorising legislation, and I am confident that the officers will exercise the power that is being delegated to them in the appropriate way. The final matter I'd like to address on is that although items of this nature appear overly technical and take up a lot of pages of the briefing minutes, they are important because if a delegation is not appropriately authorised, then any decision that is made can be challenged. So I am satisfied and confident that the appropriate steps are being taken in a manner authorised by legislation, and for those reasons I am comfortable and satisfied in commending the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. If I might just note some further comments. It is an exhaustive exercise that officers must undertake, and with some independent support as well, in ensuring that the delegation schedule is appropriately managed and reviewed in accordance with changes to legislation and appropriate changes as per the review that we've undertaken. So I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.10, Foreign Arrangements Scheme. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Yes, Chair, I note I have rejoined the meeting. I apologise for that. I am pleased to...
Thank you. We noted your return to the meeting, and we note your moving of item 5.10. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, I second that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Chair. It is with some personal serendipity that I move this motion, which is a requirement under the recently adopted Australian Foreign Relations State and Territory Arrangements Act, which does capture local government organisations, to highlight the absurdity of some of the agreements that this organisation had in place with sister cities and other foreign entities, including state-owned Chinese government corporations, which might not necessarily make it unique amongst local government, but considering the newly adopted legislation and the public commentary that has associated this legislation, and may I say significant public support. It does highlight that local governments, and Casey not being unique, as I said, have probably overstepped the mark and have used such arrangements previously for no other purposes except justifying travel expenditure. I think when the organisation was doing a review of what has really been the tangible, if any, benefits of the sister city relationship with Berwick-upon-Tweed, or the city of Springfield, or Dujiangyang City or Mianyang City, for example, we're all at a bit of a loss of what they actually were. Yes, there was a China engagement strategy, which thankfully yourself, Chair, stopped responsibly in April of last year. And there were a number of visits one way. I don't think we were able to identify many, if any, visits to the city of Casey. But it goes without saying that the responsibility of organisations such as the city of Casey has to be to its citizens and its ratepayers first. And it's very difficult to identify what benefits the citizens and ratepayers would have got from these arrangements. They seem to be expenditure items. They seem to be very one way, as I've said. And frankly, from my interpretation, were utterly pointless. So whilst it has taken a Commonwealth legislative instrument for us to be in a position to now formally, by virtue of that instrument, cancel these arrangements, they were arrangements that we would have potentially cancelled in any case, purely because of what I articulate in my remarks, but also because I think the first foray into us re-evaluating and reconsidering what our true purpose was exercised by you, Chair, in April last year with the cancellation of the China engagement strategy, which I do commend and was fundamentally responsible. And as someone that has over nearly 15 years experience in international development, investment and trade, I really question the role and point of local government beyond assisting with any applications that might come their way, either facilitated by the Commonwealth or relevant state entities. So I'm very pleased to move this. Yes, it has taken a Commonwealth instrument to do so, and I trust that all other municipalities act as responsibly as we have in ensuring that not only they comply with the legislative organisations, but they do so with the true intent of what the Commonwealth legislation is trying to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, Chair. It's appropriate that this motion be moved, and it's. I note that it's taken a Commonwealth legislative instrument for a motion like this to be moved, but I agree with the comments of Mr Boardman that the place for a local government municipality like Casey is to concern itself with the matters of its local community and to leave foreign affairs to other levels of government. And it's appropriate that these relationships, and I note that reading the papers, they are all noted as being inactive, other than one, and for those reasons I commend the motion.
Thank you. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Move to our final item this afternoon. That's item 5.11, contract acceptance and sealing, and that's for intersection construction at South Gippsland Highway and Glasscox Road, Hampton Park. The recommendation is the acceptance of a preferred tenderer. Do I have a mover?
Yes, I move that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And a seconder?
I will second that, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. I note from the papers the description of the tendered goods being works for the construction of the signalised intersection at the South Gippsland Highway and Glasscox Road, and that the works consist of significant pavement modification, including new slip lanes and signalised turn lanes. I've considered the material, I've considered the tender analysis. I'm satisfied that the appropriate steps have been taken to identify a successful tenderer, and I note that that tenderer is identified in the motion. I want to thank the members of council who have worked on this project and ensuring that council funds are spent in a responsible way, and ensuring that an appropriate organisation is selected as the successful tenderer according to council's decision-making matrix. And for those reasons, I commend the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. Did you want to speak to this item?
I need to acknowledge my colleagues' comments and further affirm that we are completely satisfied with the probity aspects of this particular tender, and wholeheartedly endorse the recommendation in the council officer's report.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. I'll put that motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. That's the conclusion of officer reports this afternoon. I move on to item 6, which is the consideration of reports of committees, the record of discussion as outlined, various meetings that have been held, and we just note that record of discussion. Item 7 is petitions, and there are 2 petitions received for this council meeting. The first is item 7.1, advertisements for MPs in sporting club grounds. The petition was tabled by Mr. Anthony Disanayaki, along with 108 signatories. And we have a recommendation that the relevant council department write to the head signatory and provide a response to the matters raised in the petition. Do I have a mover for that recommendation?
Yes, I'll move that.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. Seconder? Mr. Boardman?
Seconded.
I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. And the second petition is at item 7.2, and that is the Doveton Pool in the Park. It's a petition which I partly have here, which was tabled by the Doveton Umemmering Township Association. And we have a recommendation that the relevant council department write to the head signatory and provide a response to the matters raised in the petition. And that response will be in line with the resolution of the council earlier this afternoon at item 5.4. Do I have a mover for that recommendation?
Yes, I'll move that.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. And a seconder?
Seconded, Chair.
Did anybody have anything to say in moving or seconding that? Just noting the report.
Noting the report, Chair.
Thank you. I'll put that motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 8 is urgent business, and there are no items of urgent business this afternoon. Item 9, closed council, and there are no items for consideration in confidential this afternoon. So I have one further duty, and that's at item 10, and that is to close the meeting this afternoon, to thank those who've attended in the public gallery and those who've been listening live stream. So good afternoon and thank you.